allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I meant to say good afternoon. We're so used to being in the morning, but good afternoon, everyone. And I will note for the record that Miss Ina Jo Davis Chappelle is excused. And we welcome our fellow board members. We'll go right into our agenda. I move to approve the minutes from November 1st, November 15th, and November 20th, 2024 board meetings. Second by Mr. McCaffrey.
Second.
Yes. And sir?
Two issues when we go to vote. I was not present on the 15th, so abstained.
Okay.
And there's a correction to the minutes for the 20th. My name is not listed as the attending.
Okay, and you were in attendance at that meeting. So we'll note for the record that Mr. McCafferty was present at the November 20th, 2024 board meeting. And that we note that your excused absence on the 15th and that you will abstain from voting on those minutes.
That's correct.
Okay, so for November 1st and November 20th, we will vote on those minutes. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. And on November 15th, we will vote on those minutes. Ms. Stickett and myself, aye.
Aye.
Aye, the ayes have it. It is so ordered. Thank you so much. And I move the acknowledgement of the disposal of the electronic poll books. And if I get a second, then I ask Mr. Pilati to say.
I'll second that.
Second by Ms. Stickett. Mr. Pilati.
Good afternoon, everyone. We are asking for the approval to destroy our old electronic poll books, which are Apple iPad 2s. At the beginning of March 2020, or in March 2024, for the first time, we used new hardware with our electronic poll books. We still use 10X Software Solutions and their application, but through state funding, we were able to update and enhance our equipment. Now, our old equipment, what we want to destroy are Apple iPad Mini 2s. And what we purchased was Apple iPad 10s. And so we tried the last year to donate these electronic poll books. Cleveland School District and a couple other places, no one wants them. And part of the reason they don't want them is that the iPad Mini 2, the iOS, which is the Apple operating system, caps out at iOS 12. For comparison, currently, if you buy one, it has 18 on there. So what that means is it doesn't have the operating power for some of the apps that they use in the school setting in order to actually put them on the iPads and utilize them. So we're not having someone wanting to take all of them, and we have over 1,000, like 1,400 of them. We will work with County IT, who has a contract with a company called Rep3. And Rep3 is a recycle, reuse electronic equipment vendor. Doesn't cost us anything to do that. What happens is we provide the equipment to the recycle plant, and then whatever they can get for the pieces parts is how they make their money with that. So we will, the form in our board packet is something that the chair and I would sign. It's not to the Secretary of State's office. It's for record purposes only. And then our fiscal and IT department works with the county IT to have the equipment destroyed. So we tried. It's old, it's dated. It's like someone who has a cell phone that they purchased in 2013. It might still work, but not all that great.
Thank you, Director. Any questions on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Thank you. And Chair recognizes Deputy Director Gallagher for item 30.
All right, just for a discussion regarding Dean Fable's vote by mail ballot. As you'll recall, we had several ballots that required additional research. One of them was an absentee ballot that was received by Gene Fable. On October 29th, 2024, Mr. Fable completed and signed his vote by mail application. On September 16th, the CCBOE received and processed his vote by mail application. On October 8th was the first day that we could mail out vote by mail ballots, and Mr. Fable's ballot was part of that mailing. On October 16th, the CCBOE applied the October Ohio Department of Health STEVE report that showed that Mr. Fable died on October 6th. And his registration record was subsequently canceled. On October 21st, the CCBOE received Mr. Fable's vote by mail ballot. The signature date on the return envelope was October 4th, 2 days before he, according to the ODH file, passed away, and 4 days before we even mailed out the ballots. So Mr. Fable's vote by mail ballot was not accepted for tabulation. And as I said, according to the Ohio Department of Health report and his published obituary, he passed away on October 6th, 2 days prior to the vote by mail ballot even being placed in the mail. So, as I said, his ballot was not counted.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Callagher. Any questions from the board? So the bottom line is he passed on the 6th. We didn't mail anything till the 8th.
Correct.
And then you got a ballot returned on the 21st
Correct.
of October.
Right.
Okay. All right, no other questions or comments?
Why are we referring this?
That's what we
That
were
was
looking to
gonna-
do. Basically, I just wanted to.
I mean,
be clear
I
with
also
that.
don't, you know, even for us to do any further investigation, I think be outside the scope of our job anyway.
Yeah,
And not appropriate, and puts us in a different spot, so.
right. In my opinion, I think this would be appropriate, for public integrity to
Right.
take additional steps.
Okay.
But of course, it's the board's decision.
Well, based on the information we received, I move that we refer this matter to the Secretary of State's Office on Public Integrity.
We'll second it.
Second by Mr. McCaffrey. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Aye, the ayes have it. Thank you, Mr. Callagher.
Yeah, and one additional thing then is leads into point number 4 regarding our amended results. One additional piece of research that we did was for a provisional ballot that was received, and according to the Steve report, that person also was deceased, but we did further investigation, and it turns out the individual is still alive and in a nursing home. And although the Steve report did show that the person had passed away, there was no accompanying obituary, and we did further investigation, verify that the person is very much alive. So with that, we are amending our results from the previous, and including her provisional ballot in this results.
Okay, so you'll count that vote because the information we received is errant.
That's correct.
Okay, that the person, we received that she was deceased, and then we found out she's not deceased.
Exactly. So we get the staff, and then it came to the agency, and we provided the Steve report to the registration department. And there was a matching date of birth, a matching last four of the social security number, and first and last name. All important data points that when that matches, we go ahead and do that process. And it, so again, through our research, we found this. Now, Deputy Director Callagher reached out to the Secretary of State's office and said, hey, we want to make sure that you're aware that this report forwarded to us wasn't generated by the Secretary of State, but forwarded from there. This is what we found. Could you please take a look and see what's happening?
And they confirmed that the person was alive, but they're looking into it to find out, is this just a one-off? Is there a glitch in their process? So to investigate it further, but, so we're waiting to hear back from
And
the
that
final
person's
word on
vote
it.
will count, so we certainly applaud your due diligence in that. Ms. Stickett?
And did we also have someone who voted twice in 2 counties? Where are we at with that?
Yeah.
We mentioned at the last meeting, I just wanted to probably follow up with that.
Waiting to see if we get contacted by the person. I believe the person voted a regular ballot in Franklin and a provisional with us.
Within a short period of time, which is why I think we were making it happen, and people might forget, but that's,
So what I think is at the January meeting.
Yeah.
Again, we knew what to do with the ballot, but I think at the January meeting, we'll come and say, we'll get a little bit more detail, and then it's and physical public integrity.
Okay, do we talk to the Franklin County DOE on this at all, or let them know we're looking at it, or?
Prior to rejecting it, we did.
Yes.
Oh, okay, thank you
Yeah,
so
that's
much.
part of the process.
They're aware. All right, appreciate it, then
Yeah,
we'll
yeah.
look forward to follow-up.
Sure, so so then I will just say regarding agenda item number 4, we did then provide that provisional ballot, to Brian Cleary and his team in the ballot department. They had a rerun, the ballots and they did do that, and so it did, update all the appropriate categories. It did not put anything into an automatic recount or anything like that, but the, individual will get voter history, has gotten voter history. And, again, we have up until 80 days, I believe, from election day to amend results. And for items like this, that window, exists.
Well, good. Well, thank you for your work and ensuring that voters vote counted. And that
Yeah, it's good
segues, I'll say to Mr. Clary, Chair will recognize Mr. Clary. And I'm sure his report would look at.
Yeah,
Yeah, good afternoon.
I don't want to speak too much more, but I would say there's probably not too much to speak on.
Yeah. I'm not gonna
They
read the whole
stole
thing.
your thunder.
Yeah. The change, we adjusted it, didn't affect any races, didn't affect any outcomes, we just want to get it reflected in the record so we can do that, and we'll post new results once we get everything certified.
Thank you, sir. Floor is yours. Anything you want to add?
If you have any questions about that, the amendment, we can certainly take it. I do want to point out the certification report, I have an incorrect number, the first summary of official results, I left the old number in there, it says 5,887,282, that should be 84. It's adjusted in the column, in the thing, not in the thing. First page, in the thing here, so
Okay,
I'll get it adjusted before it gets on the website.
okay, thank you.
Just want to get it for the record if anyone grabs a copy here.
All right. Okay, so we can move along to these board, so I'll move the certification of the admitted official results of the November
Yeah.
5th, 2024 presidential general election.
Second.
Second by Mr. McCaffrey, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Ayes have it. And then we have the certification of the recounts for November 5th. Anything you want to add to that, Mr. Clerk?
No, we did, for the last 2 weeks, we've been performing the recounts, well, obviously with the break for the Thanksgiving holiday. So, we recounted first, 2 weeks ago, we recounted issue 37, the Parma Heights Charter Amendment. There were a total of 9,030 ballots in this contest. We randomly selected one precinct, which equaled 629 ballots, or 6.9% of the total ballots cast in that race. We then hand counted that 5%, or that 6.9%. And then we scanned that 5% through the high-speed tabulator. We then compared the results, they matched. We then took the remaining 11 precincts in the contest and ran them through the high-speed scanners again, and then compared that to the official canvas, and everything matched again. And then this week, early last week, we recounted the County Council District 6 race. In that race, there were 72,308 ballots cast. We randomly selected 5 precincts, or 3,770 ballots, or 5.2% of the total ballots cast. We performed the same procedure we did in the other one, so we hand counted it, scanned it. If they matched, then we went on to the other 90 precincts, and we rescanned those, and they matched the official canvas. So both recounts, automatic recounts matched the official canvas exactly, no changes from the official.
Thank you, sir. All right, hearing that, I move the certification of the recounts for the November 5th, 2024 presidential general election. Second by Mr. McCaffrey, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye, the ayes have it. Number 6, we acknowledge the post-election audit for the November 5th, 2024 presidential general election will be conducted at the Board of Elections Tabulation Center, 3951 Perkins Avenue, Cleveland, Ohio, 44114, beginning on December 11th, 2024 at 9:30 a.m. So I move that acknowledgement.
Second.
Second by Mr. McCaffrey, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
The ayes have it. Yes, Mr. Perlott.
Just want to, just remind everyone, so at the certification of this election on the 20th, Brian had announced 2 of the contests are determined by the Secretary of State's office. So they will be auditing the presidential contest and the US Senate contest. And then the third contest needed to be something that was a question or a candidate countywide. And we happen to have one countywide question. I think it was issue 55.
That's correct.
And so that's what that will be. And so we just put this on today because now, because the recounts are complete, we actually know the specific date and time.
Thank you, sir, for that clarification. All right, and this is the fun part of the job. 7, we have an official kids ballot. And in the November 5th, 2024 general election, it was a kids ballot, which is a mock election held in Cuyahoga County. 742 future registered voters cast ballots, and we have those results. And we thank you, Mr. Clary, and your staff for tabulating these. For favorite princess, Elsa triumphed with 120 votes, followed by Tatiana, 98. Favorite superhero, Spider-Man, swung to victory with 169 votes, with Wonder Woman close behind at 156. The favorite ice cream flavor, cookies and cream, emerged as the favorite, garnering 147 votes ahead of chocolate at 130. And favorite sport, soccer, took the top spot with 163 votes, with basketball securing 120 votes. And I'll note for the record, that included a notable number of write-in votes and some overvotes and undervotes. So the kids are just like the adults. So with all of that, I move to acknowledge the official results for the November 5th, 2024 kids ballot.
Second.
Second by Mr. McCaffrey. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Ayes. Thank you, sir. All right, and on to candidate and petition services, and the chair recognizes Mr. Steve Dell.
Steve Dell, Supervisor, Candidate Petition Services.
Good afternoon.
As the report indicated, PIP voting went very smoothly, and we have a solid and reliable team. Some of the challenges that they did encounter that I just want to mention was the 3-sheet ballot made for longer wait time to print. And then if there was some kind of error with the printing, then a little bit longer. So we did have extra printers out for the staff to use if things started getting bogged down. But certainly that was a bit of a challenge. Another one was just the format of the ballot indicating to voters where to vote on issue 1, because all of the English text started on page 4 and then continued on to page 5. So we had to point that out to the folks so they could understand where to indicate their choice. But I think that went over pretty well. I just wanted to point out too that week 4 was a rather brutal one for the staff. In the past, we've allowed, or we were able to have staff kind of break it up a little bit and not work the whole day. But when we saw the numbers piling up early on, we just said everyone's got to stay on. So some of these folks were open 12 hours at least, plus early time getting ready and then waiting for voters and then closing down. So it was over 80-hour week for some of these folks, and just wanted to acknowledge them. That's I was happy everyone stayed. Just put it that way. Some highlights: we did 62,922 voters. That included 174 takeaways, and comparatively, that's almost 10,000 more than what we did 4 years ago. We did 2,239 provisional voters. And of those, 402 were on election day. They came down here and legitimately had a registration issue, and so we were able to issue them provisional ballot. In addition, though, we also had another 800 folks just pop in and want to vote, and we had to send them on to their polling location. And we have a system that a lot of people weren't sure, and we can print out a little ticket that gives them the address. And that's
So, excuse me, Mr. Dell, so to be clear, you had 400 or so legitimate voters on election day and another 800 who just showed up.
Yeah, we
So
tried.
you had 1,200 people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, 12.
Yeah, wow.
It was a busy day.
Yeah, busy day. Thank you, sir.
I just wanted to point out the online survey. some folks did, respond to that and talk about early in-person voting, and 85% of the respondents gave us either a good or very good rating, so that was good to see. Not surprised either. And so just some of the quotes, people were saying, you know, staff was incredible, they were polite and kind, and did a phenomenal job, amazing job. People did comment a few times on the lightsabers that we were using to direct traffic, which actually was it turned to be a very efficient way to get move people through the line and let staff know where there were available spots. But it kind of lent to the fun atmosphere that we were really trying to portray there, as with the kids ballot as part of that whole atmosphere. And then also comments about the bell we rang when someone is the first time voter and everyone cheers. You know, just make for a festive kind of atmosphere even after waiting for 2 hours to vote. And that's all I've got. If there are any questions or
Any questions from the board?
No, just comment.
Please.
I would concur. I voted here myself, and the staff is just, you know, and I paid attention to what was going around me as well, not just me. You know, you could see they were all very helpful, kept things moving. So kudos to the staff.
I want to echo that. The comments that I received were overwhelmingly positive, and especially as it related to the way you service ADA voters.
Yeah.
So I got some really positive on multiple occasions about that as well. Mr. Carlotti, yes.
I just wanna, build a little bit upon what Steve said. I mean, the staff did an amazing job, and with the volume of people who came down here and voted, that week before election day truly is 5 election day hour type days. I mean, we opened 7:30 to 7:30, but one of the things that happened this election, it typically didn't happen. Usually, the day of the election, we'll have voters who will be in line when the early person closes, but within 10, 15 minutes, we worked that line. They were working it for an hour because they just kept coming. And so those were 13-hour plus days for a whole week, which equals that. And the first order through the door, through the last order through the door, his team did service with a smile, which was great. And again, the reason we get so busy is because everybody, they want to vote, but really they want to come see Steve Dell. So as long as they got him there, we'll have big crowds.
Hopefully they got some of the pizzas we sent over. We sent some pizzas out. They were ordering them out on the curbside collection. We had all these pizza boxes.
Oh, yeah, they were coming
We
here
were
too.
shipping them over to the warehouse.
Yeah.
Figured that somebody on the thing has an app. I guess they're all free, and they're just free. I forget where it was. Free for election. It's election support from Domino's and somebody else. There was 2 pizza places.
And they did come, and I love pizza, but I tell you what, it got to a point where I can't eat any more pizza. I think it's a lot of staff.
We were
the same way.
We were giving them to the campaigners too that were standing longer.
So,
Mr. Dell, did you or your staff find that any of the things that you learned from the previous lessons learned that you were able to implement in this election were useful to you?
No, I think we've got a pretty good procedure in place, and it's working well.
Anything moving forward that you don't have to delineate?
Well,
Did you
I mean, I
identify a
guess
few
one
things
thing
that
is
you want to make?
we did bring out more printers. Because we were kind of locked into just one printer for 2 operators. It's like, that's probably not gonna have having more out.
Yeah.
We were kind of proactive on that, I guess.
So when you're in the trenches like that, a lot of the lessons learned, you don't have time to wait till the next one, you just implement it,
Well,
do some things right there on the spot.
I would say one lesson that we learned from a previous election was ensuring that, it may seem small, but it was big. At each of the scanners, having a seasonal employee at the scanner, especially with it being a 3-page ballot, to instruct, no matter how much you tell people are signing, saying pause in between, being able to say, no, please, hold on, and reminding them at the end, and also reminding them to backfold the stub before you remove it. those are things that small, but definitely pay dividends during the early in person and keep those scanners moving along.
And I think during the last week, having that tent in place in the parking lot did help to pull the line in, help keep the campaigners a reasonable distance away so that people could safely pull in and out of the driveway. So
Yeah,
I think that worked out very well.
Thank you. All right, thank you, Mr. Dill. Anything else from Mr. Dill? All right, so I move to acknowledge from the early in-person voting PEO performance report from the November 5th, 2024 presidential general election.
Second.
Second by Mr. McCaffrey. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Thank you. And on to the human resources agenda. I move to approve the personnel agenda, the promotion of Holly Bodie from election official 2 ballot department to clerk to the board, administrative assistant, effective December 15th, 2024.
Second.
Second by Mr. McCafferty. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Aye, the ayes have it. And I also want to move these new positions of program coordinator, CPS, effective 12/15/2024, supervisor absentee services, effective 12/15/2024, and program coordinator absentee services, effective 12/15/24. If there's a second, then I'll ask Mr. Bellotti to say a word.
Second.
Second by Mr. McCaffrey. Mr. Bellotti?
Sure. At the November 15th meeting, I had mentioned that Deputy Director Keller and I were looking at the operation and how our lessons learned and what do we need to do as we go forward into the future. And also in the back of our minds, thinking about as we transition eventually to 1801 Superior, and we make those moves, how do we best staff the agency to get everything correct and complete. And so with that, with Deputy Director Keller and I speaking, talking with the managers, HR, fiscal, how do we do this? This is what we came up with, these 3 positions. The absentee services department, which we created, will ultimately be responsible for the vote by mail confined voter, which they focused on this election cycle because they were physically housed at the Halley, while CPS focused on early in-person voting because that was in this building. When we come together under the new building, they will absorb all of that. So it's a lot, especially with, if you think about how CPS and ballot were handling that, that was a combination of knowledge and wisdom of 2 managers, 2 assistant managers, and 5 or 6 supervisors. So taking Becky Brake and Josh Fossey, while excellent employees, they need that support staff. And that will be the operation that will have the highest number of seasonal workers. So between opening the absentee ballots and doing early in-person voting, it will be huge. And so to best do that is not always necessarily more line staff, but more supervision. So this way, when the seasonal staff comes in, because you're not going to get away from it, being able to lead them. So with that, we created these. Now, these are positions that will be posted externally. We'll try to get them up soon. And while we don't have a date certain on when we're moving into 1801 Superior, we can't wait for that to happen because, as we also have talked about in the past, next year, not as well attended elections as 2024, but more difficult operational year with the September primary, and especially with Cleveland being part of that. And they so happen to be going through redistricting. I'll talk a little bit about more in business with that. So that's where these positions came from.
And thank you. That goes, I believe, to Ms. Chappelle's point 7 months ago when we were talking about this, that we're now building that out. Because that was a question that we did it, but now it's been totally fleshed out and built out.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Any questions or comments from the board? All right, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it, aye. All right, and then our third order of business under human resources is a 2% COLA, cost of living adjustment. And I move to approve a 2% cost of living salary increase effective December 15th, 2024, which will be reflected in the first pay of 2025, issued on January 3rd, 2025. This increase applies to all permanent full-time employees on the CCDOE payroll as of December 15th, 2024. This adjustment was included as part of the 2024-2025 biennial budget approved by the Cuyahoga County Council on December 5th, 2023. Is there a second? Second, is there anything we need to self-explanatory?
No, I think so.
All right. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. I know you all were voting aye too. We took care of it for you. All
There you
right.
go.
Congratulations. All right, and then on to new business. We have a few items. The chair is going to recognize Mr. Peter James first. And then after Mr. James is presented, then we'll take it over to the director. Good afternoon, Mr. James.
Good afternoon. Peter James, Selection and Compliance Administrator. Following the November 5th, 2024 general election, Director Vladi asked me to put together some numbers to bring before the board. Creating a report, titled November 5th, 2024 general election by the numbers. I think it was just sort of an interesting way of, telling a little bit of a story about what happened in this election. Overall, specifically, the different voting methods, that sort of thing. Obviously not gonna go through all 17 pages, there's a lot of information, but I'll try to touch upon, I think, some of the high level numbers that I think were interesting. Told a little bit of a story about, how this election took place in Cuyahoga County. Overall voter turnouts, the average of the 3 previous presidential elections came in at a 70.5% overall voter turnout. Anywhere between 71% in 2020 to about 69% in 2016. Our expectation going in was we should see a voter turnout of around 70%. What we ended up getting was much lower than that, was 65.7%. So based upon expectations, we were thinking we were gonna get about 630,000 total voters in the election, but we only ended up with about 587 voters, which is almost 43,000 voters fewer than we would have expected based upon the average of the past 3 presidential elections. The report includes, if you were curious, maybe you've already looked at this, precincts and cities, the 5 that had the highest turnout, 5 that had the lowest turnouts. I'll just call out 2 cities in particular because 2 of the board members are from there. Cleveland, Ward 17 actually came in very positively. They had voter turnout almost 4% higher than the average of the last 3. And Seven Hills squeaked out at 0.1% higher turnout than the last 3. Cleveland significantly underperformed. That's a whole nother story in and of itself. But one number that really jumped out to me, I asked Mary Hannah, she, who works in our IS department, she did a lot of work in terms of getting me some of these numbers. One thought I had was, okay, how many, because the voter turnout was low, like how many voters who were voted in 2020 in Cuyahoga County and are still registered, they didn't leave for another county, but are still here, did not vote in this election. And the number that came back was pretty startling. It was 97,000 people, 97,000 Cuyahoga County citizens that voted in 2020 are still here, still registered here, didn't vote in this election. But that was a pretty remarkable number. That's like basically 15% of the people that voted in 2020 chose not to vote in this election for whatever reason. Some of that gap was made up, there's new, whether it's new registrants or new voters to Cuyahoga County, makes up for some of that difference. Maybe a small percentage of people that didn't vote in 2020, maybe voted in previous elections came out for this one, but that was a pretty striking number, not a very encouraging number. All right, looking at the state as a whole, statewide turnout was 71.7%, which is exactly 6 percentage points higher than we had here in Cuyahoga County. So we were definitely lagging. We had the 3rd lowest turnout percentage in the state, trailing only Lawrence County at 63% and Lucas County at 63.6. To put that into perspective, in 2020, 4 years ago, there were 8 counties that had a lower turnout than us. So again, we weren't great in 2020, but there was at least 8. Go to 2016, there was 21 counties of which we had a higher turnout percentage than they did. Go to 2012, it was 47. So you can see the trend. In 2012, we were basically right in the middle of the pack. And then over the last 3 presidentials, we are moving in the wrong direction towards the bottom of the list. Real quickly, looking at the 2 other, big counties that we tend to look at. In this election, Franklin County had a 67.39% overall turnout, so about 2% higher than us, and Hamilton County was right about 69%, so about almost 4% higher than we had. Turning to vote by mail, I think as we all knew, vote by mail was down in Cuyahoga County. It was really down across the state. Again, looking at past presidential election, not looking at 2020 because of, COVID skewed vote by mail, but looking at 2016, 2012, we were expecting to get about 23% of the ballots to be cast to become by vote by mail, which would have given us to what we should have expected, about 205,000 vote by mail ballots this election. But instead, we only got 166,589, or about 38,000 fewer vote by mail ballots than we would have expected based upon past history. Now, that's a big number. Like when we get just slightly looking ahead to the election day, we came in about 19,000 less than what our average would have expected. So even though vote by mail is a much smaller percentage of all the votes that are cast in an election, we had double the amount of vote by mail voters who we expected to vote that didn't compared to election day, which is to really give you a sense of how low vote by mail actually came in. Let's see here. Just quickly looking at statewide, I mean, we are still, even though we had a lower vote by mail turnout than we expected, we are still a great state when it comes to vote by mail across the entire state itself. We had 28% of our votes were cast by vote by mail, where only statewide it was 18%. If you go back to 2016, 22% of vote by mail ballots in the state were cast by mail. So there's been a drop of 4%, and in Cuyahoga County, we were at 31%. So there's a little bit of a trend. Not only did it, impact us, but I think it impacts statewide, where fewer people, for whatever reason, did not choose to vote by mail in this election. But having said all that, Cuyahoga did lead the state with the highest vote by mail turnout, both as a percentage and overall total, and it wasn't really even that close. Early in-person voting, that rocked. I mean, it rocked for everybody. As Steve mentioned earlier, this was the highest turnout we've had for early in-person ever. We had about 9,400 more voters for early in-person in this election than we had in 2020, and 2020 was the highest year in terms of overall total that we had ever had before. But that was the case all across the states. Statewide, 26% of all ballots cast in this election came during early in-person. And Cuyahoga County, it was 10.7%. So even though we had a really high early in-person turnout for Cuyahoga County, it was still well behind what the statewide average was. And as a result, Cuyahoga County actually had the lowest EIP turnout as a percentage of any county in the state. And again, really not even that close. Like the next closest one to us was Summit at 18%, so they're a good 8% higher. So it's just really interesting to see, even though we had this big surge, it was happening everywhere, and pretty much every other county, it was surging at even a higher level than we had. This is sort of an interesting note that Hocking and Logan counties are very small, but they actually had over 50% of all votes cast in the election came from EIP. So they had like a higher turnout in the early person than they actually did on election day. Just a quick number here that sort of, I think, shows like this real kind of flip, at least when it comes to the absentee voting statewide in terms of the pattern. Let's see here. In Ohio, more as I said earlier, more ballots were cast during EIP, 26%, than by mail, 18%. So in this election, during the absentee period, more people chose to vote early in person versus doing it by mail, 26 to 18. But we'll skip over COVID because that, you can't really count that. Go to the next presidential election back, 2016, it was basically the opposite, where 22% of ballots cast early came by mail and only 12% by early in-person voting. So from 2016 to this year, there was a jump from 12% statewide voters choosing to vote early in person to 26, which is pretty remarkable. So that's probably something we're gonna need to pay attention. It looks like there's a bit of change in voting patterns. You know, the COVID one year, you know, where everybody voted by mail, you know, doesn't seem to be sticky, at least in terms of based on the data we saw for this election. Just real quickly on election day, we had a little bit of a lower turnout than expected. Based on previous elections, we figured we'd get about 42% of all registered voters would vote on election day. We ended up with about 40%. It's a little bit lower, but not the drastic, you know, not drastically lower like the way we saw with, you know, vote by mail. Statewide, 55% of all ballots were cast on election day. For Cuyahoga County, it was 61%. We were like in the top 7 counties in terms of percent of votes cast happening on election day. So our shortage didn't really come that much from election day. It mostly came through, you know, the shortage we had with the vote by mail turnout. One interesting thing that came out of this, we have been tracking this for the past few elections, is looking at the turnout on election day in general elections based upon, you know, time blocks. And we can get this information based upon check-in times, you know, through the electronic poll books. So if going into this election, you're looking at 2023 and 2022 general elections. Yeah, there's a little bit of a surge, you know, right in the beginning of the morning, the first 4 hours or so. There's a little bit of a dip in the middle of the day and it picks back up at the end of the day, but for the most part, it's reasonably flat. Like if you look at 2023 and 2022, you're looking at like mid 30%, you know, beginning of the day, end of the day, high 20s in the middle. In 2020, for the presidential, we saw a big surge of voters right out of the gate. 45% of everybody who voted on election day voted in the first 4.5 hours, and then it kind of just leveled off after that. Okay, so we have that as a point of reference. And for this election, anybody who was, you know, involved in just sort of tracking the ballots or anything that had to do with this election, noticed that there was just, you know, a huge surge of voters in the morning. You know, and then we were getting this huge turnout. We're like, okay, like what does this actually mean? If it was reflective of kind of what we saw in the 2022 and 2023 general elections, you know, there was a decent chance that that surge was going to maintain itself at some level for the rest of the day, or if it did drop, it might pick up again at the end of the day. But what we found happened, which is the same thing that happened in 2020, is there's a big push of voters. You know, you're almost getting 50% of your election day voters by lunch, and then it just kind of peters out after that. And that's exactly what happened this year, just like it sort of happened in 2020. All that to say, like, I don't think we want to be like a hard, fast rule, you know, when we have a presidential election in 2028, you know, and the lines out the door to start the day and be like, oh, you know, it's going to be fine by the afternoon, it's going to peter off. Like, I don't think you necessarily want to, you know, put your mind in that place. But I mean, we've got 2 presidential elections in a row where the turnout is really huge in the morning, but then the afternoon rush doesn't really come in the same way we see it in other elections. That's interesting. I don't know if most people think presidential election, it's going to be busy. They need to beat the lines and get there early, so then they end up creating their own lines at the beginning of the day, and then it ends up being slower later. I thought that was just kind of an interesting voting pattern that we're seeing. Okay, let me just quickly get through the rest of this here. The makeup of the electorates, you would have seen a lot of this is just breaking down, you know, registered voters by their age group, you know, how different age groups voted, that sort of thing. One interesting stat, I know Tony Perlotti mentioned it right before the board meeting, there is 556 voters over the age of 100 that are registered. That was like, whoa, that's pretty cool. Of that, 209 of them voted in this election. I thought it was very impressive. So 38% of voters aged 100 or over voted in this election, with the oldest person being, it's gonna be 110 on January 1st next month. So someone who was 109 and change voted in this election, and there was several others that were just sort of right behind that person. I thought that was pretty neat, you know, in terms of the type of people that are still voting in this. One other thing, this is another stat that I know Director Perlotti was interested in, was just, okay, we had a big surge in early in-person voters, as we sort of learned that happened everywhere across the state, but where did these voters come from? You know, like where did this big surge of early in-person voters come from, and compared to just even say 2020? And so we looked at the last general election, which was November 2023. if an EIP a voter voted in the November 2023 election, how did they vote? And what really stood out there was 45% of them voted in the November 2023 general election on election day. Then for this election, decided to vote early in person. Why? I don't know. That just seems to be a reflection really everywhere across the state where early in person voting was up significantly, or it seems like a decent number of voters who maybe traditionally voted on election day made the choice to want to vote early in person. I don't know if it was sort of sentimental, thinking this is gonna be the last early in person, you know, at the Hughes building, which maybe it will, maybe it won't be, I don't know, but I just thought that was very interesting. Okay, a couple more things real quick. This was more of like a curiosity of mine. I looked at the US Census Bureau data. They did an estimate of citizens, you know, people that live in Cuyahoga County last year, and looking at those that are aged 18 or older. So in theory, you know, they meet the eligibility to be a registered voter. There was about 982,700 people in Cuyahoga that met that definition. And the current number of registered voters we have is 893,000. Long and short of it is there's about 89,000 people aged 18 or older based upon census estimates that are not registered who in theory could be registered. So that's just kind of something to throw out there for people wondering, okay, how many people are not registered who probably could? It's probably in the ballpark of 89,000. But then this is even more interesting. So if you take, you know, if you just take that same number of people and then subtract out who actually voted in this election, there was about 40% of people living in Cuyahoga County, 18 years of age or older, who did not vote in this election. But that's a pretty striking number when it gets down to it, because not everybody, I mean, we typically look at turnout numbers by registered voters, which is, you know, makes sense. But there is this block of people who aren't even registered, who could be registered, that isn't getting picked up. And then one last thing, I think I mentioned it a little bit at the last meeting, learning from the SOS conference in the summer about a Facebook vote alert, which I think is a really good tool, which allows boards of elections or election administrations to send out Facebook posts that will be seen, not just typically, which is only being seen by people that follow you, being seen by anybody who has a Facebook account in a specific region that you choose to pick. So that opens up our audience quite significantly. And just for a quick comparison, as you remember, we had an election integrity series that we ran this summer, which I think was very successful, excuse me, and useful. But then unfortunately, at least in terms of this context, it came before we knew about these vote alerts. So we ended up doing 62 different posts during the election integrity series. Once we did learn about the vote alerts, we did about 10 posts leading into this election. One of those posts was about a voter guide being sent out. That post received 109,000 impressions, which basically means it appeared on somebody's screen on Facebook, you know, 109,000 different people, which was more than double the amounts of impressions all the posts related to the election integrity series got combined. Just to show you like just what a significant difference, you know, just being able to use this tool to promote things, you know, had in comparison to, you know, what we did, you know, just this summer. And with that, if you guys have any other interest, you know, anything you wanted to have clarified or anything like that, I think I hit on, a fair number of the sort of high level and interesting numbers from this election.
Thank you, Mr. James. Fellow board members?
Good.
No, good report.
Yes, probably the most interesting report that I've seen, you know, and I used to write some reports like this. You know, this was excellent. It really unpacked a lot of data and interpreted for us in a way that we can easily digest what transpired in November. So very good work by you and those who assisted you. There's really no action we need to take on this other than having received it as information with our thanks for a job well done. All right, Mr. Pilati.
Just 5 quick things, and of course, any other questions you may have. One, this Friday is the last day for the fiscal department to pay bills and have it hit the 2024 budget, and anything that comes after that be 2025. So Manager Tara Brown and fiscal You may be seeing another, report come across in the email, just as we're trying to get as much as we can, paid against this budget and not go into the next year with a deficit, but she's doing great in acclimating herself and getting it done. Assistant Prosecuting Attorney Musset and I are working on getting a mediation date with Brian Bardwell, who has appealed the decision, and so we are trying to find something that mutually works for all the parties to go participate in that fund process. I had mentioned, I think maybe through an email, that as part of our end of year review, one of the things we're looking at was registration numbers across the precincts in Cuyahoga County. And we have identified a few that go over the 1,400 number that is stated in statute. And so John Eddy in GIS, our IT department, is working on that. He has provided Deputy Director Gallagher and I with a draft map of the city of Strongsville. Strongsville has a lot of growth, and it looks like, so they have 4 wards, and it looks like 3 of them will each gain 1 additional precinct. I have sent an email to Strongsville, the clerk of council for Strongsville, so there's the president of council and the mayor, letting them know that this will be coming. They don't need to do anything in Strongsville,
Okay.
but want to give them the courtesy of, hey, this is what it will look like. And either January or February of 2025, then we'll bring those maps to this board to approve, and then we'll go ahead
So
and.
we're just adding precincts to the wards that already drawn, or?
Right, so well, what John did was he looked at the wards and looked at what the different numbers were and he rebalanced them. So what he wasn't able to do is just kind of take some from here and put them there and
Right.
have it. So he had to actually add in a new precinct and then also go take some voters from here, there, and whatever, from all the surrounding precincts. So basically, kind of redrawing the precinct structure in those 3 wards.
Okay,
So Strongsville has the, I believe that's the potential for the most change. So we got that one out first. The next one he worked on is Berea. He came with a draft map. We just did Berea last year,
yeah, so,
but there was a complex that went in, or a couple that were bigger than what was anticipated. So that will probably result in an additional precinct. Yeah.
The dreaded question,
Uh-huh.
any splits anticipated with these?
So these are not creating any splits.
Good.
City of Beechwood he's gonna have to look at. We might actually eliminate a split. There's one split in Beechwood, and where that split is, I think almost can be a natural place for him to create a new precinct, and I believe it's a school district split, so that'll be nice. So I will get those out to the council in Strongsville. Berea's will be going out very soon, then John will work on Beechwood, and then also North Royalton has one really big precinct, so we'll work on getting those out and get those approved. So it's, it's one of those things, just kind of looking, and as some of these communities continue to get development, which is good, it is doing some of these, and what we're doing is you want to get it down, not to 1,400, you hope you need to get like around 1,200 or so, so if something does go in, another street or something, you can absorb that, so.
Question.
Yeah.
Do we work in the opposite direction as well? Eliminating precincts?
yeah, I was wondering that too.
So so in 2022, we went through and we looked, some of the charters require when you have the census to go ahead and take a look at your ward boundaries. In 2022 is when we actually did that, where some of the municipalities redrew their ward boundaries.
Right.
When they did that process, then obviously we have to touch the precincts. And through that, we did eliminate some, but it was just those communities that have ward boundary changes. We lost some precincts in Euclid. I think we lost some precincts in Parma. And so we did look at that. Now, what we haven't done in a long time is look at the whole county in totality. And so we kind of, again, we did the ward boundary ones, and now we're just looking to see what is larger. Cleveland, which I'll go ahead and dive into Cleveland. That's something where potentially, maybe we will lose some, but it'll be interesting. So Cleveland never, they have not yet adjusted their ward boundaries based off the 2020 census.
Right.
Through their charter, their ward boundaries are kind of driven off of a population of 25,000 people. With those numbers, I think this population of Cleveland went down around 25,000. And per their charter, if they lose precincts, they lose them in two. So they keep an odd number, of wards. And so they got their information in 2021. And they had the ability to start working on that. The city council, did start working on precinct boundaries in 2024, in this summer. And, it's a big project. They are going from 17 to 15. And, they are getting, actually today at 3 o'clock,
I think they dropped.
yeah, they dropped, so they're going from 17 to 15, and today at 3, Council President Blaine Griffin is supposed to have a press conference, and he's gonna, I think, release the draft maps. About, I don't know, 3 weeks ago or so, I did send correspondence to Cleveland City Hall with the possibility, a high possibility, likelihood of a May primary. We need those ward boundary changes sooner than later, because we don't have a lot of time to get the precinct modifications done before their June filing deadline. Especially because we'll have a big election, everything gets locked in, you can't mess around with that, you can't do that till after applied voter history. So that put us on an expedited schedule, which therefore kind of put city council on an expedited schedule. So again, those should be made public today. And per an article I read, Cleveland.com, and some information that had been disseminated to staff, looks like their intention is to introduce legislation at their January 6th council meeting and of the ward boundaries, and approve it at that same meeting. So do everything in one meeting. John Eddie currently is working on some behind the scenes things in the DIMS database, cleaning up, touching up data points. So when we do get these maps, he can go ahead and start to do his drafts. That could be something where we may lose precincts, but it definitely will be interesting, because it's going to impact a lot of voters. When you're eliminating 2 wards, it can't not impact that. And it kind of seems like, and what we anticipate is like downtown, what you may see is some of the wards shrink, because there's a lot of vacant buildings. You see it around here that become apartments. And so you increase the population there, but then as you push out, and probably more so on the east side of Cleveland, you see some population loss. So those wards might actually become bigger geographically to try to get that balanced, the balanced precinct. So the goal will be for us at our February meeting to provide what these maps are. Now, I don't know how much input we're gonna be able to get from the city of Cleveland. I had notified them if they were able to get us the maps in December, that there would be a greater chance to sit down with some of them. There's a lot of council members, but what we would get now would be draft maps, which I don't know how much that's gonna change. So we're trying to do what we can, but until you get that legislation, and when you get the legislation is when you get the legal definition. The legal definition is really what you need to finalize that. If we get a map now, John can get it close, but definitely not until you have the written word that tells you travel eastbound down this street to that, and that is when you really tighten them up. So, you know, well, that'll be a big project. It sounds like we'll be getting some things first, working with candidate petition services, in anticipation of some individuals wanting to pull petitions for the June filing deadline. We have a simple 1-page document that we will give to these individuals who want to pull now, that making them aware, like if they want a map, they're gonna have to get the map from the city of Cleveland until we finish our process. That we won't be able to verify anything, our records won't be updated. If we would recommend that they kind of collect signatures from the middle part of these wards off these draft maps that they'll get from the city of Cleveland. And basically they circulate at their own risk. So we will let, make them aware of that. So it'll be a big project, it'll be a busy project. We'll do the best we can with that, so.
Interesting.
I know you have a maximum number, do we have a minimum?
There's not a
Not
minimum,
really.
no. The code statute just defines the maximum. Again, somewhere between 1,100 and 1,200 voters is what we strive for. You gotta have some kind of goal to work towards, but, we have some precincts that are 500 and some of that depends on splits and geographic boundaries and those, what makes sense. So John has been doing it for a long time, which is good. We're lucky to have a permanent GIS operator on site, and so we'll be busy to tackle that. So the Strongsville, Berea, a little bit of a warm up, not something we do all the time. So dust up some of the cobwebs and some of our processes and stuff. So we will, do that. And then the last item, so Bills, Bardwell, some suburban districts, city of Cleveland boundaries, and the last thing is 1801 Superior. The Wednesday before Thanksgiving, the city of Cleveland issued a conditional building permit that went to the landlord. That was an item that was negatively impacting the whole project, delaying what they could get done. So now that tentative permit has been issued. Based off of that, Public Works is working with the landlord, who is responsible for a lot of the construction of the project, to get a modified schedule based now off of knowing that you have this conditional permit where you go forward. So originally, this Thursday was the date that that the Board of Elections with Public Works had talked about. This will be the decision day on go or no go for the May primary there. We still will have a discussion this Thursday, but with this permit coming now, we may push that 1 week. The landlord has notified Public Works that they would be done with the construction of the building around the middle of March, which is over a month later than they're supposed to be. And if it's the middle of March, it's definite no-go. The Public Works, Mike Dever, the director, though, has asked the landlord to provide an expedited schedule. Expedited meaning, when the landlord gave that schedule, the construction schedule, it was just a 40-hour work week from Monday through Friday, no weekends, no overtime. Director Dever said, we factor that in and come back to what that schedule would be and what that cost would be. Trying to get it back to finishing everything by January 31st. We haven't gotten that expedited schedule yet, what that will be. That would be the only thing that would potentially make the spring primary possible to go there. This morning, Deputy Director Keller and I took the management team over to the building, because depending on what's going to happen, we need to start to prepare to move. So the county Public Works has contracted with a company, RSI, I think it's Resource Relocation Specialists Incorporated. They are under contract with the county. They will be a move coordinator. They will not physically move any items. The county is currently out to bid for movers, but they are the ones who will coordinate, meaning that they will work with us. They will work with the mover who is selected on going through labeling items, determining how things are packed, something that currently exists in this building, where will its physical home be in the new building. So they do this work. They have done work for the county before. They were the moving coordinator for the new county headquarters building. They brought all those buildings into there, as well as they do some private work, like Key Bank, I think, is one of the entities that they work with. We've had Tony And I had an initial virtual meeting with them just to be introduced to the principals. I walked away with a good feeling from that meeting. I also believe Deputy Director Gallagher did. We're gonna have a meeting this Thursday, an on-site meeting with RSI, with our management team, do a meet and greet and start to learn a little bit more about their process. Ultimately, when it comes time for this to happen, RSI will meet individually with each department who is moving, with the manager and the assistant manager. And they will go through, they will spend a day going through everything, logging what is moving, how, when it's gonna move, how it's gonna move, and all those types of items. And so in order for the managers to have a better gauge of their new space, we went over there today, one, because they hear Tony and I talking about it. And it's like, okay, you need to get that visual, because when they saw it, it was wide open. Now you start to see some walls, you better get a better gauge. But also told them to take notes, take pictures, so you can kind of start to put together that puzzle. And when RSI comes together, you can be more effective in that process. So we're going down that path because you don't know what's going to happen. And whether it happens in the spring or later on, we would still have to go through this process. So we need to go ahead and best position ourselves. So it is a mentally consuming and exhausting process that Deputy Director Gallagher and I are going through with all these entities because of just things that are out of, we're control freaks and there's a lot of things that are out of our control. And as you all know, we are so deadline driven and we have no flexibility in those statutory deadlines. And so you can only bend so much, you know, and as much as we want to be there, we will not put the election in jeopardy, but hopefully something can happen. And so while we would typically know that this Thursday, I think the county's probably gonna need an additional week to see what kind of miracles can happen, you know, as far as the landlord. And I would say probably board member McCafferty, working in the construction industry, knows that if you put enough tradespeople and you add some overtime and some additional days, lots of things can happen, but there's limits to that too.
There is.
So, you know,
Sometimes there's not enough space.
no, well, tripping over each other.
Yeah.
You know, you can't put, a guy can't,
Yeah.
carpenter can't hang a sheet of drywall if the electrician hasn't finished what he's doing. So, you know, there's only so much you can do. So we're trying to be realistic, hopeful, but realistic. Those are the main things, except for questions, just dragging along.
This is the director.
That's all.
Question.
Deputy Director, anything you need to?
No, I think you covered it all.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Chair has received a public comment request and Chair recognizes Twan Billings. Mr. Billings? Please step to the podium here. And if you could state and spell your name and your address for the record, and then we recognize you.
Okay, it's Twan, T-W-O-N, Billings, B and boy, I-L-L-I-N-G-S. What else you asked for?
Address, please.
1876 Stanwood Road, East Cleveland, Ohio.
Thank you, sir. The floor is yours.
I was coming to find out, there was a challenge on the candidacy. I'm an East Cleveland councilman. And it was a challenge as far as who was the council and who wasn't the council. So the Supreme Court just, you know, ruled that I am the legitimate council person from day one, as well as the 8th district labeled that as me being the council person, not the Supreme Court that ruled. And so I wanted to find out who do I pick my certificate up from as far as showing us, you know, that we get our certificates from here.
Okay, thank you, sir. So that question is noted and our clerks of the board will have that. And then we will refer that to the appropriate department and get an answer for you expeditiously.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Right here,
You just hold that tight for me, yes.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. There being no other business before us, I move to adjourn the meeting.
So move second.
Second by Mr. McCarthy, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye, the ayes have it, it's so ordered. Thank you so much. Merry Christmas,
Thank you.
everybody.